Part 2. So after the 2008 retconning, X-Men and everything else in the Marvel Universe got cinematically fucked. And every time you see a movie or whatever, they go by what is now current instead of what I know is current. Currently, they have left off the fact that Captain America was once replaced by a man named John Walker, who was a U.S. agent, who took the job, and they actually switched places. That being said, sliding on back to the X-Men. Now, the X-Men and everything, once the Redcon came in, and then after the Redcon came in, I pretty much stopped reading the comics because they changed everything. After the House of M, they changed a lot of stuff there. Nate Gray came from one time to fight Cable, and they had a special spinoff and all the other stuff. And you just started getting to a point where you're reading and you're spending money, but you're getting angry. And that was the thing. They started changing things. They started rewriting and different stories, and Cable and Strafe and Executioner Song was great. Extinction Agenda was great because Extinction Agenda really gives you the depth of how much these guys actually care for each other. And unfortunately, spoiler alert, Doug and Warlock are both killed by them. Doug was killed in Executioner Song. No, excuse me. Doug was not killed in Executioner Song. Doug was killed in Fall of the Mutants. He was the first mutant to suffer. Each mutant in each team, because it's crossover sagas leading up to Inferno, Magic got turned back to being a little kid. She also caught the legacy virus. Doug was shot on an island by Cameron Hodge. And I forgot which X-Men got messed up. But Colossus killed Riptide. He snapped his neck in a fight. And they beat up Scalp Hunter's group. I can't remember the name of their group. Scalp Hunter, Archlight, Prism. Polaris became a bad guy. I forgot how she became a bad guy, but she became a bad guy. And all of that happened. Now, once the retcon happened, I got lost because they had already done stuff with the Siege Parallax, which totally rewrote the X-Men's history to begin with. Then they retconned everything, and then there's no Jean Grey, there's a Hope Summers, and all the other stuff. And then they kind of screwed up Excalibur a little bit, and they kind of screwed up Alpha Flight. So just so that you guys know, let me explain why I brought in Excalibur and Alpha Flight. Wolverine initially came from Alpha Flight. Alright? I don't think that was his first appearance, because his first appearance was in one of the Hulk comics, but they had to tie Wolverine to some group before he was an X-Man, so they tied him to Alpha Flight. After the retcon, I don't know what the fuck happened. The Alpha Flight and Omega Flight came into being, and that was like the thing, and then they canceled both comics. Excalibur has been canceled at least 3 or 4 times. Cloak and Dagger have both joined the X-Men and left the X-Men, joined the New Warriors and left the New Warriors, etc., etc. And then the retcon happened. Now, one thing I will say that the only thing that really pissed me off about Marvel during those little things was that they killed off the original Night Thrasher, who was Dwayne Taylor, and let his brother take over. And his brother even got his girlfriend, which was like a double stab to the face. So, and then you don't know what happens to Rage, because Rage, who was an Avenger, who was like a 14-year-old kid, who got like gamma rays or some shit, and he became this behemoth of a dude with super strength. Of course, they took all that shit off, and then they retconned all that shit. And it's basically the same thing that they did with like Luke Cage and turned him into something else and all kinds of other stuff. However, that being said, once the retcon came, all of my knowledge of comic books was sealed with a finger. Alright? Now, I say it that way because the way that it worked was that I read everything that involved mutants. Every now and again, I check out Avengers. I wasn't like the biggest fan of Avengers, but I did like the Avengers, and I did like Ghost Rider, but the only Ghost Rider I ever knew was David Koresh. And I probably didn't say that right. However, I knew all the X-Men. I knew all their backstories. I knew all the X-Men. I knew from X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, Classic X-Men, X-Factor, X-Force, Generation X, Excalibur, X-Terminators, who became X-Force with the New Mutants, So, I was into all that. Then they started doing Exiles and all that because of the whole writer's strike and everything. And then once the retcon hit, I have absolutely no knowledge of anything. Then 616 was destroyed, and this is where it affected the Guardians of the Galaxy. The original Guardians of the Galaxy, there was 4. Charlie 37, Yondu, Major Victory, and I can't remember the other guy. But, those guys were the guys that I read, and it were eventually would be 13 of them. And then that 2008 retcon happened, and they didn't exist anymore. They existed, but they were now under the cartoon or the comic called Guardians. But they were not Guardians of the Galaxy. So the retcon totally fucked that up. Guardians of the Galaxy had became Gamora, Groot, Rocket. Then it also had Kid Nova, and it had Star-Lord, who did I miss? Drax. So it had those guys. Now Kid Nova, he was just basically a tag-along because he was with Nova Corps most of the time. So he would show up when they needed him. But for the most part, I didn't really want to read Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh, also, every now and again they had that rivalry with Howard the Duck and Rocket go from their own separate comics to that comic. So I was like, alright, you know what? I'm done reading comics. So the last time I picked up a comic was 2010, before my relationship went to hell, and before I joined the military, and then my body went to hell. Anyway, that being said, after the retcon, all of my knowledge on Spider-Man, X-Men, and everything else went, and that's pretty much where it ends. So if you think that was bad, DC was just as bad, if not worse. DC also went through a retcon. DC went through the New 52s. They went through Infinite Crisis, Infinity Crisis, all the other stuff. Just like Marvel with the Infinity Wars, Infinite Crisis was basically kind of like the same kind of thing, just told from the DC heroes' perspective. And then somewhere in between all that, Marvel and DC had released comics together. 2 times they had 4 or 5 special comics where they managed to fight one bad guy. They both had like gods of both worlds. Combine them, and then they wound up fighting on the gods so that the worlds wouldn't be destroyed and the universes would go back to normal, which happens at the end, spoiler alert, for both comics. Now, with DC, in one of the sagas, they did some serious rewrites and some serious, we're gonna mind fuck the shit out of you with comics. So, the death of Superman was a big thing. Bill Clinton's in that comic. If you don't have it, I have it. Bill Clinton is in that comic. He's definitely in the Funeral for a Friend saga. So if you don't have that, you should probably look for it in trade. You probably would pay a pretty penny like I did with my Inferno saga. Now, each comic books both did a 911 thing. We're not going to go there. We're going to DC from now into the end of the video. In DC Comics, if you don't know, the death in the family for Batman was the death of the second Robin, who was Jason Peter Todd. Jason Peter Todd was a reckless recluse who first became Robin after stealing the wheels off the Batmobile. We don't know how he got through the security program, but he did it. Bruce liked his skills. Bruce took him in. As by this time, Bruce and Dick Grayson have gone their separate ways. They had a big old fight, and I think Batgirl might have been the center of the fight. And then Batgirl and Bruce started dating, and Robin went on his way, and I guess he eventually would meet Starfire, etc., etc. Now, I think that shit might have all got retconned when they did it was either Infinite Crisis or Invasion. One of the two was one of them that they did it, where Superman never came to one of those Earths. The Superman of all Supermen, he never made it to Earth. Alright? So wherever he was, he went into like this time thing, and he punched the time wall, and the ripple effect affected all the Earths. Alright? And then he went off to wherever the hell he was supposed to go. So he never made it to Earth. He was still Superman. He was not Clark Kent. He was still Kal-El. And he totally fucked up the whole DC universe. Alright? So every Earth who got a Superman, except for that one, got changed. Alright? Jason Peter Todd, who had died, came back as the Red Hood, who was not the original Red Hood, because the original Red Hood was the Joker in a different universe. Not the Joker from the Suicide Squad, but the Red Hood himself was a Joker, who somehow or another, if you guys go back to the movie, the cartoon movie, Crisis on Two Earths, when Batman and Night Owl have a conversation about their fighting, which is why he got the yellow flash, the like zoom, but not U-Bot Thorn. I don't know which zoom it was, but he's spinning around to make the machine run so he can get back into the portal or whatever and destroy Earth Zero or whatever Earth that was that didn't have any life on it. Batman and Night Owl have a conversation. And in the conversation said, you and I have both lived the same life and we've both seen the same thing because we are initially the same people. And Batman goes, you're right. We both looked into the eye of the abyss. But when you looked, you blinked. And Batman ties him to the bomb and dives back through the portal and stops the Flash from spinning as his counterpart blows the fuck up. Alright? And that saves everybody and everything goes back to normal. But Martian Manhunter does not stay on that world where he's finally found true love. He goes back to Earth where he came from. Okay. So it kind of reflected that from the Superman punching the wall, etc., etc. Now, I could be wrong on all this shit. Because like I said, after the retcon in 2008, I was pretty much done with comics. I still love comics. I still read my old comics. But as far as like anything after 2010, I don't want it, because that's not the world that I want. The X-Men was going a certain way, and then they pretty much said, there you go, James, we're going this way. And it was getting good, and everything was about to be resolved, and then they threw a curveball from hell that hit me in both eyes and my testicles. So I kind of stopped reading X-Men. And I mean, I literally stopped reading everything X-Men, and then once the 616 was destroyed, I was done. Until Franklin Richard changed everything back. Which I didn't think that I need to start spending $5 on comic books anymore, because I was spending $5 on comics and they were starting to suck. So I was like, okay. And it's the same thing with the DC universe. I forgot who switched everything, but they eventually fixed it. And the ripple effect was that Jason Peters Todd was still alive and he was still the Red Hood. And then he became Red Robin, which Dick Grayson is supposed to become Red Robin, so you see the clusterfuck and why I stopped reading comic books. Then there was the whole Hawk and Dove thing. Then there was the two Superman thing where Superman was in a white and red and Superman was in a white and blue, and I was like, oh my god, I can't keep going through this shit. However, that reflects the same thing with Spider-Man being accused of killing himself and having to be 7 or 6 different characters in introducing us to the Dust costume. And I forgot who he gave all these costumes to. But all these guys, Ricochet, Dust, and a couple other guys, Spider-Man gave them the suits. And they all had superpowers that mimicked what Spider-Man was doing. So I guess it kind of all worked out. But after the retcon and all that stuff, I kind of was just like, you know what? I can't take it anymore. So I'll just enjoy the cartoons. Because most of the time, they don't retcon the cartoons. Now, certain things in cartoons, I have to go and question myself. Especially with the DC Universe, with Aqualad and being a black kid, but not the son of Black Manta, and then wound up being the son of Black Manta. If you guys watched Young Justice, you'll understand what I mean. And Young Justice is coming back, if it's not back already. And then there's the chick who basically has the powers like the Phantom, the speed of the cheetah and all that. I can't think of her name. But, you know, they have different stories and storylines. And, you know, she's on the Legends of Tomorrow or whatever. But the thing was, after the retcons, I pretty much gave up because I started losing that lust that I had for those comics. And then when they really screwed up Lobo for DC, I was like, oh, you guys gotta be kidding me. They totally redone his look. They didn't make him as brass and as blazing as he was. They took away his attitude. And I'm like, okay, which Earth is this Lobo from? Because Lobo's not from Earth. He's from a different planet in general, but whatever dimension that is, Lobo went from being a badass to basically being like kind of sissy-like. He was still a badass, but he was like a badass sissy. Alright? The only thing I think that kept on him was his chain and hook. And that was okay. But you know, it's Lobo. Lobo's the main man. He's the badass. He's kind of one of the reasons why people started reading more DC comics. And then, because he was basically their equivalent to Wolverine. You know, only without the memory problem. But Lobo also was a shyster, a scam artist, a con man. He'd sell his mom for yay so much credits or whatever. But Lobo was a good character. I can't really say anything about it now because I don't really read Marvel or DC. I just wait for them to come up with new comics and new cartoons, and when they come up with the cartoons, I'll watch the cartoons, but I won't read the comics anymore. The point of the matter is, when you retcon stuff, there was so well from the freaking golden age and the silver age until like the current day. All of us old guys, the 45 and up class, we liked it the way it was. Now there will be difference of opinions. There are some of you people who really liked it the way it is now. And there's nothing wrong with new. There really isn't. Because when they redid Superman, and they kind of dabbled with that between back and forth with that on Smallville, because a lot of the Smallville things were taken from the new Superman when Superman rocked a hoodie. It wasn't Connor Kent, it was Superman. It was Clark Kent, and he was younger, and he rocked a hoodie, and they made it more modern, and he wasn't going by Superboy, and they would call him anything but Superboy. It was like he would be the Blur, or he would be like the Speedster, or whatever the hell. It's just going through all kinds of different things. But it was Superman. They just didn't name him Superman. And it's just like when the Legion came out with their cartoon, and they started losing ratings, so they brought in Superman X, who was a clone of Superman and Lex Luthor's DNA combined, and he has like kryptonite type blood, and he has knives. And the thing they did that for was because the ratings for Legion was getting bad, and so they souped it up, and then they had both Superman. They had Superman Clark Kent, or Kal-El, and they had Superman X, who I think also went by the name of Kal-El. I won't swear to it, but he was raised by a computer. So that was the thing. And then Brainiac was a good guy, and Brainiac was a bad guy, and all the other stuff. And then all the cartoons went off. Then they brought in the Green Lantern on Cartoon Network, and then they also brought in Beware the Batman, because Batman Beyond was taken off, and then The Batman was taken off, and then they brought in Beyond Beware the Bat, and then that was taken off. And so, they kind of just like crossed everything out and just said, okay, fuck it. Then they made a couple of more DC comic movies featuring the Bat family, where you have Lucius Fox's child, who's a boy and not a girl this time, being Batman. I forgot what his Batman name is. Then you have Robin, and you have Nightwing, and then you have Damon, and then you have Tim, and then you have some other people, and then you have Batman, and then you have Batwoman, and you have Batgirl, both of them last name Kane, because you have the Asian one and the redhead one. So it's just like one big clusterfuck. But if you love the comic universe, you're going to check out the cartoons, even if you're not going to check out the comics. Because the cartoons kind of simplify stuff and put things in perspective. And you watch them, and then you don't. There was a Batman the animated series movie that they made where Batgirl was Latin American, and her father was a criminal boss, and she said they had to bring him down. It was a good cartoon. I can't remember the title, but if you guys can find it, let me know here on the thing. I'm going to end this video with this. There's nothing wrong with new stuff, but when you're going to retcon shit, you should probably prepare us old guys for the shit that's about to go down, because sometimes when shit goes down and we pick up a comic that costs you like $5.50, you kind of want to know what the hell's going on. And a couple of those things in the back would be something we would like to be known about. See, when Marvel would do comics, Stan Lee would always give you a status report at the back. DC wasn't so fond of doing that, but Stan Lee did it. And so when you submit Stan Lee with Marvel, hey, true believers, Excelsior, this is this. So when you read the next issue, you'd have like a little block on what's about to happen next. Granted, you'd have to wait 34 fucking days to do it, except for like in the summer of like 91 or 89, 90. No, 91, 92, when they started producing 4 comics a month. Because you had 2 X-Men books that you had to get. You had Uncanny X-Men, and then you had X-Men. And they were coming out like wildfire, except for like the first debut comic of X-Men in the 90s, they had 4 different covers, so you spent money. If you were a fan, you probably bought 2 of each comic with each cover, because each comic, one you would buy to keep, the other you would buy to form the poster of all the X-Men, and you could put it all there. Yes, I did that. I don't know what happened to the poster, because I think somebody either stole it or they got burnt. I don't really know. But I do know that I bought 4 different Uncanny X-Men comics, because those were different comics, and I had to buy 4 X-Men comics because I had got confused. So I managed to wind up buying the first 2 copies of the same, and then the second 2 copies of the same. And in those comics was when they brought Xavier back, and the X-Men had to go into outer space to fight the Shi'ar Empire, wound up fighting the Skrull, etc., etc. So I'm going to do one more video, and it's not going to have anything to do with retconning. It's just going to talk about the Skrulls and the Kree. So I'm James Williams Sr. Granted, that video will probably go through some shit because of the retconning, and I'm going to lay down some laws and stuff. Alright, I'm James Williams Sr. Come for number 2. Peace and